Oh no, he's back again. Yes, I am. So soon as well. Okay, well, I'm actually going to try something a little bit different this time. That is to answer similar questions from three people, all to do with measuring change management success. Two were from my recent gig for the Asian Institute of Management in the Philippines. And the questions were from William Aoyong, who's a Director Program Management at Huawei, who asked, how could you determine if CM is a success? The second question was from a Dennis Algenio, sorry Dennis, I'm not quite sure how to pronounce your name, who's a project manager with IBM, who asked, how does one measure quantitatively the progress or success of CM in a project? Okay. The other question was from my PMI PM versus CM Botswana gig, but I unfortunately didn't capture the name of the person who asked the question, which was, can you please expand on the success factors for CM and how the indicators can be measured? Cool. I did actually cover something similar in video one, my first ever video in this UAsk IAnswer series, which was from an Ed Shaw, and answered the question, how do you best capture, demonstrate, report on the value, effectiveness of OCM efforts applied on any given initiative? And I talked about measuring communications, business readiness and usage and adoption, which is also the subject of video 29 from Mitra Krishnamoorthy, which answered the question, how do you measure and track adoption? Take a look at them, okay? Because I've answered some questions already, as I mentioned, on the subject, I'm going to try and come at these new questions from a wider perspective, because this is a big and a much debated subject and of great interest, I guess. Unfortunately, I'm only going to be scratching the surface in this short video, but I'll see if I can do it justice. Okay? Measuring change management is one of the most difficult things to do because you're measuring what people do and their emotions during times of change. I also say in my PM versus CM sessions for PMI chapters, change management is not easily measured since the results are often intangible, but there are ways you can. Measures come in two different guises. There's tangible measures, the quantitative. As I said, I've already covered a few of them in those two videos I mentioned earlier. But there are others like training outcomes, which I forgot, but never mind. Then there's the intangible measures, the qualitative. Things like engagement surveys, voice of the customer, feedback interview, and sentiment analysis and so on. But as I'm trying to look at things from a wider perspective, I thought I would do a bit of Googling on the subject, and believe me, there was quite a bit of information, so I've had to be quite selective in what I chose. So here we go. This is what I found. From a blog called Use a Multi-Dimensional Definition of Success by Wendy Hirsch, she says, I find it most useful to think about change success as multidimensional rather than a singular thing you attain. She goes on to mention some research done by Susan Miller, which offers a helpful framework for evaluating change implementation success and includes consideration of three dimensions, that's completion, achievement, and acceptability. It's common for organisations to focus on one or two of these areas. However, each of these dimensions is necessary but insufficient by themselves to provide a complete evaluation of the success of the change effort. It's essential to reflect on change success using all three. Number one, achievement. Did you achieve the intended results of the change? Measure this to avoid confusing action with results. They're not the same thing. Second one is completion. Did you complete all intended aspects of the change implementation within the anticipated time frame? Metrics on this dimension often relate to project management metrics such as schedule, scope and budget, and change management such as communications, training and adoption. The third one, acceptability. How satisfied are your stakeholders with the change process and its outcomes? Measure this in order to gauge how the process of change has or is impacting people and how people in your organisation perceive the product of the change. It's interesting and it really got me thinking a bit, but it kind of makes sense, doesn't it? I hope you agree. Right, now, it would be wrong of me if I didn't quote my good friends at ProSci. Through ProSci research, trends on how to measure change management effectiveness have emerged. At the highest level, your measurement strategy should assess the change management activities you're tasked with completing. That is, the outcomes of those activities at both the individual and the organisational levels. They go on to explore measurement in, guess what, 3 categories again, a bit like the one before. So, number 1, organisation performance. These metrics should answer the question, did the initiative deliver what was expected? Number 2, individual performance. These measures indicate whether the individuals impacted by the change are progressing through their change journeys. And finally, number 3, change management performance. The metrics in this category are connected to the actual activities carried out by the change management team. I've talked about them before earlier on. Remember? Do you? Good. Another snippet from an article called Driving the Value of Change Management Through Metrics, written by an Edwin Coe of MI GSO/PCQ, who I actually answered a question for in this series via video 14, which answered his question, which was, what's the difference between leading change and management change? In his snippet article, whatever it is, he mentions tactical effectiveness, training delivery, communications delivery, post-go live support, and change agent deployment. Yes, I've talked about them before and we all know about them. Then he goes on to talk about adoption effectiveness, but he kind of splits this one down. So adoption, number 1, has the change been adopted? This accounts for the basic metrics to assess if the change has been adopted post-implementation. Competency, number 2, how well the change has been adopted. This looks beyond the basic adoption metrics and considers the competency or proficiency of adopting the change. Number 3, perception, how the change has been perceived. This measures the perceptions of stakeholders in a quantitative or qualitative manner. Got that? And finally, in the article, he goes on to talk about steps to develop change management metrics. And he says, broadly speaking, business metrics can be developed in the following steps. Numbers again, sorry. Number 1, identify the desired outcomes, also known as the why or drivers for change. Why are we doing this? Number 2, identify the success criteria and value to achieve the outcomes, or the how. Yeah? How do we intend to achieve this? Number 3, identify the metrics to measure the progress, or the what. What do we need to see to show progress? And finally, measure the baseline to align on the current performance of the organisation. This will ensure that the proposed metrics are indeed measurable with available and extractable data. That's an important point, available and extracted data, because this is one of the big issues. If it's not there, yeah, all right. So, at the end of the day, success measures will be tailored to the change initiative and may already have been decided as part of the business case. way back when. The biggest problem is that a change manager is rarely brought into a project at the beginning, so there will be no input from them in defining the success criteria. Not really a good position to be in if someone with little knowledge of change management decides on the measures, is it? I've been there many times, like, believe me, I've been there many times, and it's a nightmare. Anyway, I told you this was a big subject and that I would only scratch the surface, but I hope what I've highlighted has enlightened you a bit more about measuring change management. Boom, and another one bites the dust. See you again